In my opinion, there are two forms of communication. There is intentional communication, and then there is literal communication. Intentional communication is when you are listening to somebody else and you are focusing on their intent rather than the specific words that they're using. Literal communication is when you focus more on the specific words that somebody's using rather than their intention. Let me give you a specific example. If someone asks, "How are you?" right? Somebody who goes through literal communication would answer that question honestly, even in a job interview, even in a work setting, and they wouldn't answer it any differently than if they were in a restaurant with their close friend or their partner, for example. Intentional communication is when you focus, like I said, you focus on the intention of the speaker. So, for instance, if you are in a job interview and the interviewer asks, "How are you?" or "How was your weekend?" Regardless of whether you have a good or a poor weekend, you're not going to answer that question honestly. You're just going to say, "Oh, yeah, it was fine. I watched a game or whatever," right? But if you were going through a form of literal communication, you are going to answer that question very honestly, maybe a little too honestly. So let's say, for example, you had a terrible weekend, your car broke down, you had an argument with your spouse, your kids were just on their worst behavior, your neighbor did something, just awful, right? And so let's say you're in a job interview and they ask how was your weekend? You know, it would be very inappropriate if you spend the next 10 minutes talking about how awful your weekend was. It's just totally inappropriate. But if you were in a restaurant with your friend and they asked how your weekend was, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not socially inappropriate, right? And this seems obvious, right? And it is obvious. You need to think about the context of the person's question or the context of the conversation that you're in, and then you respond appropriately. And I think a big mistake that a lot of people make is that they focus way too much on the words that someone uses rather than the intention behind those words, right? And I think this is where a lot of communication breaks down. So you could be in a situation where you say something and then someone tries to hold those words against you, right? So and I'm sure you've experienced this before where you just make you say something very obvious, you say something very clear, um, but maybe you don't use the perfect word in that sentence, right? Like maybe you could have been a little more articulate, but then the person who's listening to you is just holding on to that one word and is just going on and on and on about, oh, but you said this. No, 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 but you said this, right? And it becomes a very real problem. And I can give you a real example. A few years ago, I was just at home, I was watching TV, and I got a phone call. And I picked up the phone, and there was this lady on the other end, and she goes, "Hi, can I speak with Mr. Singh?" Now I don't know who that is, right? Like this person called the wrong number, and I say, um, "Oh, he's not here. I don't know who that is." Right? Now let me repeat that. I said, "He's not here. I don't know who that is." So then the lady on the other end goes, "Oh, well, I know you're lying. Like, I know you're lying about this because how could you say that he's not there, but then you also don't know where he is, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm suing you. I'm suing you, Mr. Singh, because you ripped off all these people. You are a disgrace." And, she's going on and on and on. And I'm on the other end of the phone and I'm like, what's going on here? I'm like, I don't know who that is. I'm sorry. I have no clue what's going on. This random lady is yelling at me on the phone. She's freaking out. And, like I'm thinking to myself, like, what's all this going on? And so, and now mind you, I have no clue who this guy is, right? Now, again, she was going through a literal form of communication. She was a lawyer after all, so it makes sense, right? Like they're always hanging on every word that you use. And it is true. If I don't know who Mr. Singh is, or excuse me, if I were to say Mr. Singh isn't here, I don't know who he is, you could interpret that as, oh, he's not in the room right now, and I don't know who that is, right? Like it sounds like a lie. It sounds like you're covering up the fact that you know who he is or whatnot. But legitimately have no clue who this guy is. And so about 5 minutes later, she calls me back and she goes, "Hey, I am so sorry. I really apologize. I truly did not mean to do that to you. I thought that, I called the wrong number and I thought that I was speaking to Mr. Singh." And I'm like, "It's all good. Don't worry about it." Um, but that's a very good example of how people just totally, totally misunderstand a situation because of the words that someone uses, right? And it's one of those things where I've really taken it to heart that the reality is a lot of people out there are not articulate. Okay. And I'm not saying that as an insult. This is just the truth, right? Like some people are really good at math, some people are really good at art, some people are great at music, and some people are really good with words. Okay. Like they have really great verbal communication skills, they're very articulate, but most people aren't. Okay. Most people aren't the best at communicating. And so you need to be patient. You need to understand that, the person that you're speaking to is trying their best, right? And if they're being honest and they're being ethical, and you take that view that people are honest and ethical, it'll make communication a million times easier for you. Um, Now, again, I'm not trying to, double down on this lady or whatever, but she entered the conversation thinking that I was lying. And that's why she totally misunderstood what was going on and put herself in a situation where she had to call me back and apologize. So I take that to heart. It's something that I really do my best to do. And I think that no matter where you are in life, and this has certainly been the case for me, whether you're in the workplace or whether you're in a social setting, if you're able to read the room and you're able to understand what the rules of that room are, and you go in with good intentions and you really try to make people feel comfortable, um, you're going to be fine, right? And there's a very low chance for communication breakdown. So that's something that I try to live. I try to hold that to my standard, or excuse me, I try to live up to that standard. And yeah, I hope this was helpful.